Hey there, e-commerce enthusiasts. Let me tell you about a game changer in shipping, ShipStation. It's the ultimate platform for simplifying your shipping process. With ShipStation, you can easily import, manage, and ship your orders in no time. It integrates seamlessly with your favorite e-commerce platforms and carriers, ensuring a smooth workflow. Gain valuable insights with their powerful analytics and reporting tools. Say goodbye to shipping headaches. Visit MilwaukeeMafia.com/ship and level up your shipping game today.
You're listening to Milwaukee Mafia, your podcast dose of Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Milwaukee Mafia Podcast. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
Gavin, we are back again.
Yes.
What are we looking at today?
Well, we were supposed to be looking at recording a totally different podcast, but my notes aren't with me. So instead we're going to do a Milwaukee Mafia podcast.
At least he had those notes with him, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, I'm wondering, somebody at my place of business is like, what the hell are these notes that somebody left here? I print them out at work, which I, probably shouldn't do, but I do. And now they're sitting on a printer somewhere. So today we're going to do our last Dominic Frinzi episode.
Oh, wow. It came up this fast, huh? It feels like maybe we didn't do that Dominic Frinzi. Was it the last Patreon we did that?
It may have been the last Patreon. We did just recently do a Patreon that was Dominic Frinzi related. This is the last regular Mafia that will be... And he'll come up again. I mean, his name is going to be around.
But this is just a featured episode.
This should be the last one where he's like a main person.
That's kind of a shame because I kind of like him.
I like him too.
He's a good character to have.
He is. I mean, I could be wrong. It's possible that I'm forgetting another thing, but at least on the near term, he's the last one that I'm aware of. And... do you want to guess what occurs in this episode?
I mean, I would imagine that he's defending some sort of gambler or something like that.
No.
Then no, I don't.
He is running for office.
I think, did we talk about, does he run like for sheriff or something like that, or is that?
So twice he's run for governor. Now he's scaled it back a little bit. It's a little bit more local this time.
Okay.
And this, I'm pretty confident, is the last time he ever tries politics again.
I'm gonna guess he's not gonna make it, but we can only listen and find out.
Let's just wait.
Oh, so maybe he does make it.
So I'm gonna start from the point of view of his opponent. His opponent is a man named Hugh O'Connell. He was born in Butler, Wisconsin in 1919. Butler is in Waukesha County, if people don't know, so it's just like west of Milwaukee. He graduated from West Division High School. During World War II, O'Connell served 4.5 years in the U.S. Army. He was briefly transferred to the Air Force for pilot training, but he didn't make the cut. He graduated from Arizona State College in 1949 before receiving a law degree from Marquette University Law School in 1952. Following his graduation, O'Connell worked as an attorney for Northwestern Mutual, which is an insurance company. From 1954 to 1964, 10 years, O'Connell worked as a Milwaukee County prosecutor, eventually serving as the first assistant district attorney under longtime District Attorney William McCauley. So the District Attorney's office in a county like Milwaukee has a lot of prosecutors, but first assistant is like you're extra special. You're like the top guy under the District Attorney. When McCauley died in October 1964, while still in office, O'Connell was named to replace him, edging out other people who they thought would get it because he was able to kind of mend some political fences and build some political bridges. And what really seemed to help him is he got the support of his boss's widow. So apparently she would go around and be like, this is the guy that my husband wanted for the job.
Really?
Yeah.
So this isn't something you get elected for then?
It is.
Okay.
DA is an elected position, but because the guy died like in the middle of his term, the governor comes in and appoints a replacement.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was appointed. Then when the next election came around, he did run and win.
Okay.
In September 1965, the U.S. Senate, like the nationwide Senate, the banking committee there uncovered numerous loan sharking operations across the country. They specifically found 4 known loan sharks in Milwaukee. They didn't name them publicly, saying there was an ongoing investigation. But locally, Hugh O'Connell said that he didn't know of any loan sharking in Milwaukee. And the deputy inspector of detectives at the Milwaukee Police Department also said that he hadn't received any complaints about loan sharking. So we have no idea what Congress is talking about. Not the Milwaukee Journal, just the Milwaukee Sentinel at this point. The Milwaukee Sentinel in May 1967 had an editorial that 1967 would go down in history as the year of awakening with regards to organized crime in Wisconsin. A National Crime Commission named Wisconsin one of the 16 states that had a mafia presence, while the government of Milwaukee had a hard time accepting it. The police chief wanted to see the facts that the commission used, and District Attorney Hugh O'Connell said there was no indication that organized crime was in Milwaukee. The sheriff also said that he didn't know of any evidence of this.
Hold a second there. So we're in 1967, and the Milwaukee is still trying to say that there's not organized crime in Milwaukee.
Yes.
Now, is this like kind of an ebb and flow where, like, at certain points in time they acknowledge the fact that there's organized crime, and then later on they say, "Oh no, it's not really there."
No, this pretty much up until the state kind of forces them to do something about it, the city consistently denies it.
Really?
Yeah.
It's kind of a hard thing to deny. I guess we're looking at it from the after the fact scenario, though. So like,
yeah, and obviously like Milwaukee or Wisconsin, again, it's not on the level of Chicago or New York.
But it's definitely there.
Yeah, it seems hard to deny it. And like, especially from the police department, because they obviously know. There's people on the Vice Squad or the Detectives Bureau who obviously know. So I don't know why the chief goes out of his way to say, "Oh, I don't know about this."
Yeah, and isn't it whenever a murder happens, or they're like, "Oh yeah, that must have been a mafia hit,"
right?
And
yeah,
it's like,
yeah, clearly they know. So it's weird. January 1968. So getting us up to our timeline now. Rumor starts going around that Hugh O'Connell, the district attorney, was going to be running for county judge. A seat had opened up, and that's the next logical step. Hey, I was district attorney, let's step up to judge.
Mm-hmm.
If this was true, that would mean that the district attorney slot would become open. They expected that Dominic Frinzi would run for district attorney as soon as he received approval from Frank Balistrieri to do so. A district attorney position would likely help the local mafia far more than if he had been governor. I mean, not that being a governor is bad, but local district attorney is pretty helpful when guys are getting arrested for things.
So why does he need to get Frank Balistrieri's approval?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
it must just be that he was a big enough client.
That's what the informant said, and that may just be a bluff. That may not be accurate, but apparently that was the belief, was that, oh, I better not go out there and do this without Frank's approval. Also, it's always kind of assumed, I don't think they could show hard evidence of this, but it's always kind of assumed that Frank is like financially backing him when he runs for things.
So it's kind of like if he wants to do this, he has to do it with Frank's blessing.
Right.
Gotcha.
So that's January 1968. But by the end of January 1968, it turns out that the rumors are not entirely true. Hugh O'Connell is going to run for county judge.
But Dominic Frinzi is as well, right?
Correct. Dominic Frinzi, rather than run for the open district attorney slot, which is, there's no incumbent, he has decided that he is going to go head-to-head against Hugh O'Connell to try to get the county judge seat.
And he's going to lose.
Wow, come on. Frinzi told the press a judge should be experienced in the law and he should be impartial. As legal counsel for more than a dozen police and deputy sheriff's associations, I know the tough problems of law enforcement officers. I have learned much from my extensive work with our policemen. I have also spent 16 and a half years as a defense attorney. These 16 and a half years involved hundreds of cases protecting the constitutional rights of all citizens. I will stop here for a moment to say, this has always been so bizarre to me. Like, he's primarily a defense attorney. That's what he's known for.
Right.
But this is true. He's also, like, the attorney of record for, like, half a dozen, like, police unions.
Okay.
And there's nothing, like, improper about that. Like, that's not a conflict of interest. But it's still weird. It's still weird to, like, represent the police when they're bargaining their contracts and also representing the people who have to go up against the police in court.
Yeah, I can totally see that, but at the same time, really, when you break it down, on the surface, it sounds weird, but where's the conflict there?
There isn't.
It's like completely different things. It just happens to be the same people involved.
There's no conflict at all. It strikes me as odd because he's primarily known as a high-profile defense attorney. I feel like the police union wouldn't necessarily want him.
Yeah, they wouldn't like him.
Their person.
Yeah, I could see that.
But there doesn't seem to be an issue there. Also, I should point out that at the time that Frinzi makes this announcement that he's going to run for the judge seat, he has also just been appointed the attorney of a very notorious Wisconsin criminal, which you can learn more about on our Patreon channel.
And I mean, just go look at go if you want to know. Just go look at the story titles on Patreon because it'll give it away for you.
They can see the titles.
Yeah,
okay.
I think they can.
Well, anyway, yeah. So that's a side story not related to this election, but he's doing that at the same time as this episode. Campaign filings in February, so 1 month into it, showed that Dominic Frinzi had spent $4,807 on his candidacy so far. His opponent, Hugh O'Connell, had spent a total of $17.
Good job, Hugh, man.
Yeah.
Way to keep running on a budget.
Yeah. Frinzi told a group of supporters that they should vote for him because if he wins, Hugh O'Connell would still be the district attorney. But if Hugh O'Connell won, the district attorney spot would then be open, and the current governor, who was a Republican, could appoint somebody to fill it. So this is an odd argument. It's correct. He's right. But it's a funny argument that if you elect O'Connell as judge, and both Frinzi and O'Connell are Democrats, just to be clear on this.
Okay.
They're both Democrats. If you elect him in, the Republican governor will appoint the new district attorney. True. Also, as a side note to that, somebody out there will probably strongly disagree with what I'm about to say, but I don't think there's a massive difference between a Republican and a Democrat as far as district attorney goes. Like, there's some nuance, I'm sure. Like, one may be more interested in prosecuting some cases than others. But I think generally speaking, like, they just don't go around tossing cases.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like if one person's district attorney, like, oh no, the murderers aren't going to go on trial. Like, that's not a thing. So
yeah.
So like the person's personal politics, I don't think are a huge factor. Someone out there, like I said, will probably strongly disagree with that.
And there probably are examples of dramatic, like where somebody was a certain party and did some crazy stuff. But I think that's more the person than the party that they're involved in.
And not that there aren't differences, because there's certain things that, like, if you don't think should be illegal, even though they are, you might be more inclined to throw the case or cut a better deal for somebody. It's possible. Mm-hmm. It does happen. But it's a relatively minor thing. Like these aren't people like making big decisions on, state level.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my side little note there. Going into March, Milwaukee's underground newspaper, The Kaleidoscope, ran articles criticizing O'Connell. This is where things get interesting. The Kaleidoscope is like a hippie anti-government like newspaper in the 60s.
Okay. Is it like a nationwide article
No.
or just like a Milwaukee thing?
It's just a Milwaukee thing.
Okay.
The Kaleidoscope is in Milwaukee, and in Madison they had... Oh, I should remember. I can't remember what it's called, but Madison had their version of it too. Anyway, so they reported that O'Connell had mortgages totaling $36,000, even though his house was only worth $17,000, and he had obtained them from the Auto Acceptance Corporation, which was run by Harry Kaminsky, who we've talked about in previous episodes.
I believe, wasn't that on a Patreon too?
Harry Kaminsky should be a regular episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was? All right.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure because if it wasn't, we might want to catch people up on that.
No, I'm pretty sure that's a regular episode. They've also found it to be suspicious that charges against 9 people accused of forging mortgages in 1963, those charges were dismissed by O'Connell. These were the charges stemming from a home improvement ring led by Augie Maniaci and a few other guys, which this is going a while back to 1963. But
I think we did an episode on this.
We did an episode on that.
Yeah.
Of Augie Maniaci, John Aiello, and a few other guys who went around and sort of tricked farmers into signing mortgage paperwork they didn't realize they were signing. The newspaper pointed out the state attorney general disagreed that the cases were weak and shouldn't have been thrown out, and they requested the records be turned over to the state. However, O'Connell said that he couldn't turn them over to the state because he had strangely lost the records and couldn't further investigate them. The Kaleidoscope newspaper dug deeper and found that the mortgage fraud company, the Maniaci Company, Wisconsin Suppliers and Builders, was affiliated with Allied Building Credits, which was another company owned and operated by Harry Kaminsky.
Oh, good old Harry Kaminsky.
Yeah. So good detective work on their part. So now they've made this connection to the home improvement scheme, which I'm pretty confident we didn't talk about that connection when we did the episode because it wasn't obvious in 1963.
Mm-hmm.
These guys did some digging and they made the connection. And now they're like, okay, we've got at least 2 suspicious things that connect this district attorney to Harry Kaminsky. He's way overpaying on his house, and he's tossed cases that were connected financially to Kaminsky. He's like, this is odd.
Okay.
The alternative newspaper also accused O'Connell of being an alcoholic. And I'm going to quote heavily here. According to them, quote, among the spots where O'Connell is known to drink heavily are the Embers, Comos, and the Irish Village. It is well known to Journal and Sentinel reporters and to lawyers who have been in a position to observe him that O'Connell has been to St. Joseph's Hospital several times under circumstances which would indicate that he was there to dry out after heavy drinking bouts. I mean,
Seems
if that's not true, they should have got sued for that.
yeah, because and it sounds like it's pretty loose evidence right there too. A question I have: you said that this is like a Democratic newspaper, right?
I didn't say Democratic. It's just an underground newspaper.
Oh, okay. Because why are they bashing? What is their beef with this guy?
I think just because he's a prosecutor, these guys are really anti-government.
Okay.
So this is like the late 60s. So picture that this newspaper is like strongly in favor of like drug legalization and very anti-Vietnam.
Okay.
Picture like that kind of a thing. The newspapers, it's not like some of them are online. You can find them. They've been digitized, and they're what you would expect from like a hippie news. They're well written. Like, don't get me wrong. The people who wrote for them were very good, but a lot of it is like just poetry and other weird stuff like thrown in, like one page will be like a serious investigation, and the next page will be like, hey man, check out this poem.
I actually want to read these newspapers.
Yeah, so it's
pretty cool.
So it's it's what you'd think hippies would write. So Dominic Frinzi picks up on this, and he goes public, talking about the financial entanglements that O'Connell apparently has, really trying to draw the line, connecting O'Connell to Harry Kaminsky. O'Connell told the press, I am running for a judicial position. I am not running against an individual. I will not wallow in inferences and innuendos, and I have no comment as to the questions posed by Mr. Frinzi, though I have satisfactory answers to all of them. It seemed like a weird thing to throw on to the end there, but O'Connell's trying to just not get into like spats. He's just like, if you want to go dirty, like you go dirty, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So good on him for that. Frinzi is campaigning, and again he takes aim at O'Connell. He says, there are many questions which must be answered. Perhaps there is some reasonable answer. I believe the public has a right to know. He then showed that in addition to these other things that had been coming out, that O'Connell also had an issue of running up debts. He had been sued by both Gimbel's and the Boston store for debts that he hadn't paid. He had taken out credit from both of them and couldn't pay it back. And he had... I
love the Boston store reference, man.
That's true.
For any of our longtime listeners, they'll understand that.
I was gonna say that he owed the Boston store money on a go-kart, but I didn't want to do it because that's not true. He also had $1,000 in tax liens against him. So they're like, does this necessarily make you a bad prosecutor or a bad judge? Maybe not. But this looks bad. Like, you owe money all over town. You owe money to the tax people. Your house is mortgaged for almost double what it's worth. You have a problem. Like, it may not be a problem with your job, but you clearly have some problems with how to like manage your life. Yeah. So it doesn't look great. He also said, at the very least, at this point, Kaminsky is like just been made like a big deal. Like all the stuff's come crashing down on him. And he's like, if there's going to be future legal issues up against Kaminsky, he goes, O'Connell should not be the guy on the bench when this happens. Like at the very least, this is clearly like not the guy who should be sitting in on that. Frinzi and O'Connell were scheduled to speak at the 14th Ward Democratic meeting. However, O'Connell backed out on the day of the event, saying that he would not appear at any event where Frinzi would be. O'Connell said, due to my opponent's campaign tactics, namely personal attacks on my integrity, I have unequivocally decided not to appear on any forum with him. I find no need to answer his ridiculous allegations. I am running for a dignified position, and I will not lessen the dignity of the position for which I'm running by appearing on a forum with my opponent when, from prior experience, I am convinced that he will use the platform to continue his personal attacks.
Wow. I gotta say that listening to this story,
mm-hmm.
I hope this guy does win, because I don't know, I just kind of want to see Dominic Frinzi lose every political position he runs for. But in today's political society, I feel like if you took that position, you would be done. The other guy would waste you in the election.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the things that they're saying about O'Connell are true. I mean, this isn't made up. These are real, actual, personal attacks that are true. They're not some crazy exaggeration. So it's interesting, like, how do you respond to that? Do you then explain it? Or do you do what he's doing, which is just like, I'm not going to attack you. I'm just not going to deal with this.
Yeah, well, in today's political environment, they just attack back, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
They don't even acknowledge it. They just go after the other person for whatever they can find about that person.
Right. And I think what he's doing is kind of a smart move, because he may have really good answers to why he ran into financial problems, but I think that he runs the risk that if he answers that and explains why, there's just more questions on top of the answer.
It's just keeping it in the press,
right?
Is what. But I still think even that approach today, you've just lost everybody. Everybody's bailing out. They're not voting for you because you're not fighting back.
Oh yeah, no,
you know what I mean. But I'm assuming we're in 67 right now. The political climate wasn't so toxic that this was probably was a good approach because people probably appreciated this back then.
I think that's
Wouldn't
fair.
you think?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, I'm not going to say that political candidates used to be all super nice and wonderful, but I think it's fair to say it's probably gotten worse.
I think it's gotten a lot worse.
And I think it's fair to say that the attacks today are not only worse, they're also more dishonest.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that's my impression. Frank Balestrieri held a party at his nightclub, The Scene, in March 1968. Between 100 and 150 people were there, including almost everybody who was some kind of mafia affiliate. The party was a fundraiser for Dominic Frinzi, running for county judge. So they're going around getting people to pitch in, help them get some money. Louis Fazio was going around personally collecting donations. He was trying to get $100 per person if possible, which is a good chunk of money in the 60s. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how many people were giving him $100, but Frank Balestrieri paid for the wine and the dinner with other drinks available for purchase. No speeches were made. Yeah, just trying to get people up on this. Later on, we'll come back to this campaign fundraiser. At the moment, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Mm-hmm. It's going to come back a little bit. By the end of March, the Milwaukee Sentinel found out that the Kaleidoscope newspaper...
Oh, God, here we go.
the Kaleidoscope newspaper had a little help. It turns out that Edward Neubecker, who was Dominic Frinzi's law partner, had hired a private investigator to follow around Hugh O'Connell ever since the previous December.
Oh, my God. See, now, in his previous two times when he ran for governor, I was impressed with some of the stuff that Dominic Frinzi was doing. This just sounds low down and dirty, man. Yeah. I mean...
Apparently what happened is that Neubecker had made an inappropriate comment about how he felt about juries. They didn't print the comment in the paper of what he said, but something disrespectful about juries. And O'Connell had reported that to the local bar association. So Neubecker, in addition to Frinzi, was not happy with O'Connell. But Neubecker explained to the bar association the only reason I'd made the comment about juries, and he goes, I was just upset in the moment. It wasn't anything personal. He goes, it was because I had just had a client who got convicted by a jury, and immediately after his conviction, he jumped out the 5th floor window of the courthouse.
Wow. Not funny. Sorry. He shouldn't be laughing.
Shouldn't be funny. But at that moment, he was a little upset with how the jury came to their conclusion. The end of March 1968. This episode's got some twists, man. From a hospital bed, bathrobe-wearing Harry Kaminsky spoke to the press about the allegations connecting him and Hugh O'Connell. Kaminsky said he was very confused by the whole thing. He said, yes, it was true he had made loans to O'Connell, but he said that he had made 10 times as many loans to Dominic Frinzi. And he goes, not only that, we used to be really good friends. I carried him on my loan books for over 10 years. His book showed loans to Frinzi between 1952 and 1960. Frinzi admitted this was true, but said it was a long time ago, and he wasn't currently in debt like O'Connell was. Interesting distinction.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, yeah, I owed Kaminsky money 8 years ago, whereas O'Connell still owes him money now. It's, you know.
But right, really his argument, too, is not so much that he has debt. It's just that, I mean, he has his house, borrowed out higher than the value of his house. You know, so it's kind of, that's also makes it a little bit different, I think.
Kaminsky said the attack on O'Connell was unwarranted and misrepresented. He said that nothing in the loans was improper. Kaminsky further claimed that when Dominic Frinzi had run for governor in 1964, Kaminsky was one of his biggest backers. He goes, I backed him financially all the way. Frinzi denied this, swearing that he never took a cent from Kaminsky in any campaign. Unrelated to either candidate, Kaminsky confirmed for the press that he would make loans to people for 16% interest, but he didn't consider that exorbitant. He said, when people can't get money, they come to me. I'm a businessman. I don't know what, maybe you know this. I don't know what the law is on what interest rates can be.
I don't either, because it's convoluted, man. It's different for the type of loan it is and stuff like that.
So I don't know. I mean, 16% is definitely high, but I don't know if that's like ridiculously high.
I don't think it is, because I think in like the 80s, that's what your house mortgage was.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was something like that, 12% or something. So
okay. So somebody out there will obviously know it better. I don't know what level it becomes like really criminal, but the election was held on April 2nd, 1968. I think you already know, but what's the outcome?
I mean, I think he's going to lose. Am I wrong? I mean, he probably does win, because everything he did was so skeezy that it probably got him in.
All right.
What is it?
Hugh O'Connell crushes Dominic Frinzi.
Okay, good.
The early unofficial tally was 173,000 to 60,000.
Wow.
Throughout the night as results came in, O'Connell was consistently holding at around 70%. So at no point was it ever really a contest. The newspaper reported after the fact that Frinzi had spent around $10,000 on his campaign. Of that money, $6,600 of it was his personal money. The rest was contributions. O'Connell had spent a total of $500.
I was hoping you were going to come back and say like $22.50. Like he had to go buy a poster like one other day.
I don't know what O'Connell was spending money on, but it was pretty much nothing. He's just like, everybody knows who I am.
I had to get a new suit for the after I won.
All right, so I'd mentioned earlier there's this big meeting at the nightclub where they're raising money for Dominic Frinzi, and there's suspicions that, rumors getting out to the local news that this was a fundraiser, but it was also a big mob meeting, just because basically the entire mob was there. So they're like, there's probably something else going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the Milwaukee Sentinel ran an article in April 25th, so a couple weeks after the event, and they referred to it as the Little Appalachian Meeting. And I will clarify that. I will explain that. So the Appalachian Meeting was this big mafia event in New York. Not New York City, but in New York State.
I think we've talked about this. Is this where like people from mafias all over came to it?
Yes. We probably mentioned it, but I want the listeners to understand the reference here. So the Appalachian Meeting was like in the late 50s. I don't want to get the date wrong, but it's like 57 or 59 or something. And yeah, top mob guys from all over the country met there. We don't know what they talked about, but they had a barbecue, they had a party, and the local police caught wind of this, set up roadblocks, and then kind of like got them all to run away, and caught a number of them as they were running away.
Mm-hmm.
And this was considered like the big event where anybody who's like denying that there's a national mafia, like, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
We caught all these guys from all over the country, most of whom have extensive criminal records. there's something going on.
And they're barbecuing together in a backyard.
Yeah. So the local paper in Milwaukee calls this the Little Appalachian meeting, suggesting that like everybody from the Milwaukee area who's some kind of criminal was at this party. In response, Joe Balistrieri, Frank's son, writes a letter to the editor. He writes, "Of all the malignant scribbling that has ever appeared in your paper, the article of April 25th, Little Appalachian Meeting, is outstanding for its contrived perversion of the truth. It seems that Italians are the only minority ethnic group who are not entitled to gather without some uninformed slanderer drawing a completely unfounded conclusion. That affair you alluded to was a St. Joseph's Day party. I was there, by the way, along with both of my grandfathers. It is about time this concentrated campaign to malign Italians for the simple expediency of sensationalism stops. But that would entail fair, honest, and accurate reporting, something of which the Sentinel is obviously incapable."
Wow.
So
did they publish that in the paper?
Yes, they did.
Nice.
Yes, they did. And, I mean, good on him for writing that letter. It's funny to me because his point is, you don't know what happened at this party. You're just making these outrageous claims because it was a largely Italian gathering. Mm-hmm. And he's right. Mm-hmm. He's right. But it's funny to me because coming in from like the angle that I'm looking at this, like he's like, not only was I there, but both of my grandfathers were there. Like that argument would be better if for the fact that both of his grandfathers weren't like top mob guys. Like his grandfather, Joe Balistrieri, was a top mob guy. His other grandfather, John Alioto, was a former mob boss. Like your grandfather's being there doesn't make it not a mob meeting.
In fact, it only helps suggest that it might be a mob meeting.
Yeah. So that's a strange thing to throw in there as an explanation.
But now knowing what you know about this meeting, like you said, many, many, many major mob figures were there. Yeah. But at the same time, wouldn't many, many major mob figures be at almost any Italian gathering?
They would.
So
they would.
What are your thoughts on this? Is this really mob associated or...
I would say not officially. Based on like informants, they asked the informants about it, and the informants were like, "Yeah, I mean, there was talk. There was, they talked about different things, but it wasn't like a formal. We're all going to sit around and have a discussion.
It wasn't like the barbecue in the backyard, which was probably much more of an official meeting because they went to flown all those people together.
Yeah. So like the only really mob-related thing that happened there, according to the informants, was there was some discussion about, like, adjustments in the structure, being like, okay, I know that this guy used to be the guy you look up to, now maybe you look up to this guy. Just kind of get a sense of, like, who's working with who, which is, yes, it's mob business, but it's pretty minor stuff. So I don't know what got the Milwaukee Sentinel to do that. That is cheap on their part to do it. So they deserve to be blasted. I just love that whenever Joe Balistrieri writes, like, he writes so grand.
It was a very well written letter, man.
This is unrelated. This episode's gonna run long because I'm got full of tangents today. But way ahead. This spoiler, but you should probably know this if you know anything about Milwaukee Mob. In the 80s, when they get in trouble, both Balistrieri brothers and Frank, when they get in trouble, the brothers both write letters to the judges trying to distance themselves from their father. John's letter is fairly short. I don't remember exactly, maybe 12 pages.
Wow, that's fairly short.
Fairly short. Well, hold on.
Okay.
Joe's letter runs over 70 pages.
Wow.
it is wild. It is wild. Like, he'll go off on these wild things where he'll make like constant like Shakespeare references, and he'll explain like, you're painting me to be this character when really I'm this character, and they're like, he loved showing off that he had a classic education. Like, he just loved it. So that he spends 70 pages.
I think we should do more stories about him because he just sounds like a funny character.
He'll come up more. At this point in time, Joe is 28. So he's still a young guy. So he'll be coming up more. So that's basically the end of this story. O'Connell is elected in 1968. He stays a judge until he retires in 1983. At that point, he says that I'm getting old. I'm kind of frustrated. I'm going to retire and work on writing spy fiction. Whether he actually does, I don't know. But that's what he said. He said, I want to retire to write spy fiction. He died a few years later of spinal cancer. In 1988, after his death, the Milwaukee Sentinel asserted that O'Connell's career had been filled with links to crime figures, citing, among other incidents, a mob figure's reported remarks that O'Connell was one of the judges that we've been talking to for 10 years. The Sentinel also noted that 3 years after defeating Frinzi, O'Connell appointed Frank Balestrie's son Joe as a court commissioner in March 1971. That's true. That does happen. Whether he has connections to organized crime figures, that is highly debatable, and really, I don't have much evidence for that. But we'll probably make this an episode when we get to that in the timeline. But it definitely was. It jumped out at people that he had picked Joe Balestri to be his court commissioner.
And which is totally understandable. I mean, it seems like the right decision in any political position would be to avoid that family at all costs.
Right.
Right.
And that's not a slight on Joe. Joe, like, as we just saw from his letter, like, not only is he a good attorney, but he's a great speaker. He's a great writer. Like, he's a really good attorney. But yeah, like, but if you want to be like, oh, that's the clean judge, that's not the guy you want to pick.
Political optics do not like having somebody up there that has the last name Balestrieri. Even if you're not even associated with the Balestrieris, it's probably a poor choice.
Right.
So
it's, and it's tough. I mean, it's because it's not fair to Joe, but at the same time, like, politically, you don't want to do that.
And I will say with the attorney, the one that's running for the position.
Which one, Frinzi or O'Connell?
Frinzi.
Okay.
So Frinzi, like, I'm so glad he did not win in this one, because I was impressed with what he did in his 2 attempts at governor. I don't remember specifics of the things he did, but he was doing things that makes a lot of sense, or that's clever, or whatever. Yeah, and this one was just dirty.
He had some interesting campaign positions, and he definitely was running a clean campaign. I mean, who was backing him may have been questionable, but it didn't seem like there were any dirty tricks involved.
Yeah, and this one seemed like it was just a big smear campaign against the other guy. And I don't know if maybe there was a shift in politics, and this had become the way you did it.
Yeah, I don't know.
So many years later or whatever, or if he just took a different tactic, but I'm glad he didn't get it, because that was skeezy what he was doing.
Yeah. So this is our last, like I said, our last one that focuses on Frinzi. I guess I will add one thing. This is totally unrelated, but shortly after this election, his wife divorces him. She files for divorce. I don't know that it's any way related to the campaign, but it does happen like shortly after. So like, apparently even his wife is fed up with him at this point.
She's like, if you don't get into politics on this attempt, I'm out. I'm done. You promised me you'd be a politician, and you're not there.
Yeah, I don't know the details of what happened, there, but yeah, like, the voters don't want him. His wife doesn't want him. He walks through 1968 just kind of like it's a bad year for him. He's like, ah. Oh.
So now, since you said this is kind of the last main story, is Dominic Frinzi still alive today?
No.
No? Okay. Well, do you know off the top of your head when about he died? And
off the top of my head, no, but it wasn't a super long time ago.
Okay. So
I mean, at this point, I think it was more than 10 years ago, but it wasn't. It wasn't like in the 70s or 80s. Like he was around for a while.
And after this point in time, he's just a lawyer. No, I mean,
yeah, like I said, he'll pop up again because he's still an attorney, so he's going to interact with a number of these guys. But yeah, he's not. He doesn't do anything big, really.
Okay. Cool. Well, that closes out Dominic Frinzi then.
Yes.
And so, I don't know. Do you got anything else you want to add before? You want to give a sneak peek to next week's episode if you know it, or should we wrap this one up?
Next week's we're back to gambling again. We're going to be focusing on a place called The Office.
I like the name.
Yeah. And it was, I don't know how much I want to give away in advance, but it was like a central clearinghouse for gambling. It was a handful of mob guys running this gambling operation that they called The Office.
Was it in Racine, Milwaukee?
It was in Milwaukee.
Okay, so cool. Because we haven't really had a lot of Milwaukee gambling stuff. At least big operations.
That's fair. Yeah, this will be one of the bigger ones.
So, very cool. All right, so you got that to look forward to. As always, we do have a Patreon. You can find that at patreon.com/Milwaukee Mafia, or just go to MilwaukeeMafia.com and find it somewhere on there. And Gavin, where can people reach out to you at?
They can go to MilwaukeeMafia.com, or you can reach me directly, MilwaukeeMafia@gmail.com. I have a couple emails in there right now that I have one that I need to respond to. So but there's some have been coming in the last few days.
Sweetness. So with that, we will wrap this episode up, and we will be back in 2 weeks. Well, we'll be back next week with the Patreon, 2 weeks with a normal episode. And we want to thank everybody for their continued support. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Milwaukee Mafia Podcast. Join us next time for another look back at Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.